So I didn't see any of your work until I saw the Sweatshop Overlord, but I do know about Wong Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and I
Yes.
just want to talk about that for a moment.
Yeah, so Wong Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest was a show. I premiered that in 2006. I toured it on and off for 8
It was a long
years.
time, yeah.
The I tend to like start a show not knowing how I sort of almost half pick the topic because it's interesting to me, and then I find personal ways to enter the material. And I had stumbled across a statistic in 2004 that Asian American women had the second highest rates of depression and suicide, and
After who? Who's the
I
first?
think it was young Asian American women, and I think that's what's unclear. I think
Who's
the
number one?
number one I think is older. It might be older Asian women,
Oh,
or I'm not sure.
okay.
You think I would know this?
That's a good statistic to know about, though, because I hadn't heard that
And maybe
before.
it's shifted in the last
Yeah,
15 years since it's come out.
yeah.
I've also I've toured that show so long. I did go to one campus where they said, well, some of these studies, like these surveys are not necessarily comprehensive, and there's all these, if you look for the information enough in a study, you'll find it. So it's not that it's been debunked,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I've heard challenges to
But
this.
but it affected you to hear that.
Yeah, it was both very familiar and but also surprising. Like we were all hiding the secret that's out in public, right? And around that time, the journalist Iris Chang, she had written books like The Rape of Nanking. I don't want to name all the titles because I might get them wrong, but she was a journalist and she wrote about some really heavy, violent stuff in history. And I remember her coming to my campus at UCLA, late 90s, and saying that she was approached to write a book about the Korean comfort women, like basically women who were taken in by the Korean women who were taken in by the Japanese Imperial Army and were taken in as sex slaves. And she said she had to say no because she needed to guard herself emotionally. And I never heard that phrase before, protect myself emotionally. I was just like, what? But you're successful. Like in my mind, the way I was raised, like, you just push through it. If someone offers you a book, you take the book, right? Like I never heard this idea that there are limits to our mental health and you say no.
Yeah.
When even if it means a potential successful book or working and making money. And then she commits suicide a few years later.
See, it's such an incredibly powerful lesson to actually learn for ourselves that maybe we should turn off the news. Maybe we shouldn't watch that movie. Maybe we shouldn't read that book or write that story or whatever it is, because our mental health is pretty fragile, especially with things that are happening all over the world right now. We don't want to push ourselves too hard. And so what did you do after that with that concept?
With that information, I was trying to think about, it's a combination of knowing that I'm trying to make a living doing what I want to do as an artist, thinking about what would be useful for people to watch that they would want to remunerate me for my talents. And I blurted aloud, my new show will be about depression and suicide among Asian American women.
Did you blurt that? You did?
I kind of did. Yeah. I was at the Wellesley campus.
And by that time it was out and you said it.
It was like 2005. Yeah. I blurted,
Mm-hmm.
I said it to my friend as I was walking around. I was visiting her campus and said that. And just sort of, I didn't say, I'm going to work on a show about my issues with this topic. I had thought I was just going to research other people outside the Wong family and, and that this would just be this like highly researched theoretical show. But as it turns out,
it keeps coming home, doesn't it?
Most of my shows never work that way. Like I always go topic first. I'm going to run for office. I'm going to do a show about the environment. And then, the only way a show really kind of gets interesting is if you get into the why. Otherwise, we would all just read research papers about this, right? So, so the show becomes over 2 painful years of development and a year on the road of still trying to make it.
This is Wong Flew Over
the Cuckoo's Nest. Is a show about a character named Kristina Wong who sets out to fix this issue with a show, this issue of depression. And it's not about me. No, it's about other people outside the Wong family. And that deep denial, which is really how this issue very much exists, I think, in Asian communities, is that, there are no You don't see a therapist. You don't tell strangers your stories. You don't entrust someone with that baggage. They're probably tied to the government, and then if they find out, they'll kick you out of the country. Like, these are real things.
Those are real worries and real concerns
that exist, right? Around this stuff. And so instead, it's better to be profitable and unhappy. It's better to be to look the part of being fine than actually be happy, right? So these are all sort of things I had to contend with when making this show. And it was both healing by the time I finally got it in good shape. It was a year on the road of touring this, where it finally felt like a performance and not like an exorcism of my personal pain.
So let me ask about that. So as you performed in that first year, was it in fact exorcising your personal pain? And that was why, after a year, you had hammered it into a place where you
it was funny. It became more funny as it went along.
You had let enough out that it could be funny,
yes,
and it didn't feel as tragic.
It's the whole tragedy plus time equals comedy thing. It was at first it was just so. I'm trying to tell these stories, but it still hurts, right? These stories still hurt. Yeah. And then I figured out, if I really lean in to the premise of the show being like, the show, everyone, it's fiction. Everyone say it with me. Fiction. Yeah, it's all fiction. And so it's the world's longest preface at the top of the show, where I set it up like, it's all fiction. Everything's fiction. In fact, we're going to draw the dramatic arc of fiction. And, here's the crisis, rising action, resolution. And then basically throughout the show, I never get past the crisis. I keep turning on my overhead projector and trying to check in where we are with the dramatic arc of fiction. We're still at the crisis, So it becomes sort of a metaphor for the fiction that this issue is in our communities. Right. And the more we fictionalize that this might be real, the more it really comes back to hurt us. And I've heard so many crazy. I have to be aware of when I use the word crazy, because I know there's a lot of issues around using that. But the sort of wild, unthoughtful things that I hear when I tell people I've worked on the show, straight up people will say, Asian American women have high rates of depression. They seem fine to me. They look fine
and seem
to me. I'm like, okay, I'm glad that's the gauge of it. But I also have that kind of thing too, where I look at other Asian women and I go, wow, everyone's so normal and happy and has their 2.2 kids. And
what's wrong with me?
And what's wrong with
Oh my God.
I
think women in general, though, I have to say, I think across the board in many ethnicities, women compare themselves all the time to each other. And that's the societal pressure. I just know that I have friends who are like, oh my God, she still colors her hair. And other friends are like, oh, why did she let it go gray? There's just so much pressure.
You can't win.
You just can't win with other women. And I think we're working on it, this whole idea, and especially with the political pressure that we feel from outside ourselves, that we're starting to really work on, let me give you a hand up. Let me help you. Let me have your back no matter what. And let me believe in you. And that's a really big women's issue right now, I think. And
And so much of what was kind of stunning about doing that show was I had a few women in crisis show up at shows, and Q&As are people just start crying and ask me questions as if I was actually trained in social work or
the therapist that they really needed all along, right?
And that's when things got really hard, because I was not equipped to and it's not that I don't want to be better at supporting those folks, but that is not my long-term vision to become a social worker or therapist. I am just the customer, everybody, right? I'm still figuring it out too. I'll listen to you. And try to be as supportive as I can, but I definitely am trying to figure this out myself, and that's
what the story is trying to figure it out.
But what was hard was, in order to book this, I was like one of the first shows that really toured. I felt like I had a lot of it's also hard when you make a show when you're about 28 years old and tour it for 8 years. You change, your life changes so much, and you're playing this older version of yourself.
Yeah.
And I guess it's different if you're playing a fictitious character on Broadway that's not you at all. But there's a moment where it was both very healing for me to try to describe mental health in the metaphor that I had put together on stage. And then there was a moment where I was over it and just doing it over and over again because it was my livelihood. Showing up at campuses where students had, taken their lives, right? And almost like brought in as a response to like these really tragic things that had happened on these campuses. And I was just sort of like, this is a lot to do this over and over again.
Yeah.
And so I feel like the shows I've made since have been a response to learning, okay, we're not going to make a show mining the worst of your pain. I'm not going to make a show and tour it for 8 years, even if it's doing very well. And by well, I guess people still want to see it.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I could talk more about that, but like basically now when I look at new shows, I try to learn something new, and I know that I will cycle out of it in 2 or 3 years.